Okay, recording. Yes, okay. Good, so let's start the next system, digestive system. Okay, starting off with functions. Ingestion, eating, digesting, breaking down the food that we eat, both mechanically and chemically, absorbing that food into our blood, putting it away, do it well. Actually, what our body does with it will be mostly the topic of the next chapter on nutrition. Compaction, so we're just dealing in the digestive system now. Then compaction of what's left over of indigestible stuff. And then defecation, getting rid of the indigestible stuff. So and we think of the digestive system as an excretory system, like the urinary system. However, it's only excretory in a very small regard, because excretion is the elimination of metabolic wastes, and feces is not metabolic waste. Most of feces, it's just indigestible material that we have to get rid of. The digestive system is excretory in one small way with bile, because the breakdown products of the heme group and hemoglobin is put into bile, those are metabolic wastes, and they're eliminated by the digestive system. So of course, we're going to look at the general anatomy first and look at the GI tract. And so this is an open-ended tooth, mouth to anus, and it just runs through our body. The inside of your GI tract is not inside your body. Your body is wrapped around it, because we're going to see that there are real changes along the GI tract, like in pH, for example. Big pH changes that would be lethal if our body experienced that pH change. Also, there are trillions of bacteria in our colon. And if they were in our body, we'd have massive infection, sepsis, and everything else. So, like I said, inside the GI tract is not inside your body. Okay, so there's the gastrointestinal tract and the accessory digestive organs. So we're talking about some of those as well. So oral cavity, mouth, pharynx. We talk about those. We talked about those in respiration. Talking about them again. And now we'll talk about the food and water tube, the esophagus, going down to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine, to the anus. That's your whole GI tract. And then accessory digestive organs, tongue and teeth. We'll speak a little bit about those. Salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. So we'll talk about what those organs do. So the linings, the layers of the lining of the GI tract. It's a mucous membrane, the lining of your GI tract. And it has different parts of it. The mucosa is the part closest to the lumen. The lumen is the inside. It has an epithelium, which changes from, sometimes it's stratified squamous, sometimes it's cuboidal, sometimes it's columnar. There's a lamina propria that's just underneath the epithelium, that is connective tissue that holds epithelium in place. And then there's what's called a muscularis mucosa, which is a thin layer of smooth muscle right in that, right just underneath that lamina propria. The lamina propria is probably mostly areolar connective tissue. Then we go to submucosa. And that is an area also of connective tissue. Um, and it's also where the blood vessels and nerves are located in the submucosa. And then there's a muscularis mucosa, which is the actual smooth muscle of the GI tract. And there, throughout most of the GI tract, there are two smooth muscle layers, a circular layer and a longitudinal layer. You see in the stomach, there's actually a third layer called an oblique layer. The stomach is the most muscular organ in the digestive system. And then there's serosa, which is the connective tissue on the very outside of the GI tract. That's probably irregular fibrous connective tissue, and it holds things in place. Okay. And there's a view of the lining of the GI tract, and I can tell right away that that is a piece of intestine, because it has villi on it. That's the only part of the GI tract that has villi. And in lab, we're going to look at what the different parts of the lining of the lumen look like in the different parts of the GI tract. There we have the mucosa. So the lining, that's the epithelium. Well, the whole mucosa has the epithelium, the lamina propria, the muscularis mucosa. Then the submucosa, there's a nerve plexus in the submucosa. Like I said, that's where the nerves and blood vessels are located. Then the muscularis, inner circular, outer longitudinal, and a myenteric nerve plexus. You'll learn that the digestive system has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. And it generally does its own thing. And of course, it's completely involuntary. It operates on reflexes. We're going to get into that, short and long reflexes called myenteric reflexes. It's entrained, however, by the autonomic nervous system. Most of the organs in the GI tract are innervated by both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic tends to turn things off in the digestive system. Parasympathetic generally turns things on. Remember, the parasympathetic is the rest and digest system, and it will entrain the operation of the enteric nervous system. Okay. Absorption is a big thing. Bringing nutrients into our body. And that generally happens, most of it happens in the small intestine. And we can see how it comes across and gets into blood vessels, and those blood vessels become part of the hepatic portal vein, and that brings all the nutrients directly to the liver, except for fat, where it goes into those lymphatic capillaries. And we'll talk more about those in the next chapter 2 on nutrition, where dietary fat goes and how it gets there. And then talks about motility. So we'll talk about two big things: absorption in the GI tract, motility. We got to move things along. And this is called peristalsis. What's called peristalsis mostly in esophagus, it's called other things, other parts of the GI tract, when you move things along and you mix things along by squeezing the circular muscle and contracting the longitudinal muscle. We're contracting the circular, which goes like this, and then contracting the longitudinal like this. Okay. There's the enteric nervous system. Submucosal plexus, myenteric plexus, stretch receptors. And so things are generally If the GI tract is stretched, then this fires up the enteric nervous system and causes contraction of smooth muscle to move things along. Right? And we're going to get to accessory organs. A large part of the digestive system is in the peritoneum, the peritoneal cavity. Think of it as the abdominal cavity or abdominal pelvic cavity. And remember, it's lined by these simple squamous epithelium, a serosal membrane called parietal peritoneum that lines the cavity, and the visceral peritoneum that lines the organs in that cavity. We're also going to have mesenteries and omentums. Mesentery is connective tissue that holds things together, holds things in place. And each part of the GI tract has a particular mesentery that does that. And actually the mesentery that holds the small intestine in place is just called the mesentery. But it's also a general term for all of these things that hold the other parts of the GI tract in place. Omentums. This is generally hanging off of the stomach. There's a lesser omentum and a greater omentum. Lesser omentum holds the stomach in place, so it's a mesentery. The greater omentum hangs out from what's called the greater curvature of the stomach and hangs down in front of the abdomen and then comes back. And it actually is a fat storage device. It's an area where we store fat in the greater omentum. We talk about intra and retroperitoneum. So intra means it's in the peritoneal cavity, and retro means it's not, it's sort of behind it. And remember in the urinary chapter, we talked about the kidneys being retroperitoneal. They are behind the peritoneal cavity. And I believe that the stomach and one part, the very first, and part of the first part of the small intestine is also retroperitoneal. It's actually not in the peritoneal cavity. But the whole rest of the intestine, the large intestine, is intraperitoneal. Okay. So we have the regulation of digestive tract. And it really is a regulation of how fast things move along the GI tract. You want things to move slow enough so that we absorb all the nutrients that we ingest. But you don't want to go too slow because it'll become compacted and dry, and it'll be very difficult to move along and very difficult to eliminate in defecation. So we want to move things along just at the right speed, not too fast, not too slow. And these mechano and chemoreceptors are going to detect this, and they also signal when certain secretions are to be made in different parts of the GI tract. Shorter myenteric reflexes are within the enteric nervous system themselves. So you stretch the stomach by food entering it, and a short reflex will start increasing the motility and secretion of the stomach just by stretching, by the stretch receptor. So that's within the enteric nervous system. And that would be a short or myenteric reflex. Long or vagal reflex is from the brain, from the autonomic nervous system. Because we'll learn that this part of turning on the stomach is called the cephalic phase. When you if you get hungry and you smell food and you think about food, your stomach starts to move and churn right there, not even have any food in it. That would be a long or vagal reflex, called vagal because it's along the vagus nerve. That's a big parasympathetic nerve that innervates all the organs of the digestive system. Hormones, there are hormones produced by the digestive tract. I'm going to get into those, what each one does, And sometimes they have effects outside of it. Sometimes they affect just the digestive system, sometimes they affect organs outside the digestive system. We're going to get to that. So first, though, we're going to take a trip through the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, starting with the mouth, through esophagus. And we're going to, of course, we know already from the respiratory system, we have a palate, a hard and soft palate. Hard, remember the reason for the hard palate, so that we can chew and breathe at the same time. And a soft palate blocks off the nasal passageways when we swallow, so food goes down and not out into our nasal passages. Okay. Teeth. I'm not going to get into, the structure of teeth. It's important to know there's 32 in all. There's incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. That's, as a matter of fact, the hallmark of mammals. We're mammals, and we have different teeth. If you look at a reptile, for example, all their teeth look alike. They all look like daggers. We have, and they don't chew. We chew, and so we bite off things and we chew. So we need different kinds of teeth. Deciduous teeth and permanent teeth. Deciduous teeth were your baby teeth. Those are the first teeth you got. And then you lost those, and now you got your permanent teeth. And it's usually 3 sets of molars. Lots of people only have 2 sets. I have 2 sets of molars because my wisdom teeth, the last ones, permanent teeth to come out, got impacted. Our jaws have been getting shorter and shorter throughout geological time. And now they're so short that actually wisdom teeth don't fit too well. And lots of people have to have them removed. Okay. Teeth help in mastication, chewing, mechanical digestion. So the first thing we do with our food is we break it apart by chewing, by masticating it. And that's all good, but but a lot of the food that we eat, the macromolecules that we eat, has to be broken down into individual monomers. And chewing will never do that. So we have to use, so we start with mechanical, we also have to use chemical digestion to break it down into individual molecules that we can absorb. Salivary glands help with that. So salivary glands, remember, are exocrine glands, ductive glands, ducts. Right. Okay, so we have to look at saliva. What is in saliva? What does saliva do for us? In saliva, there's a salivary amylase. Amylases are enzymes that break down carbohydrate. So as soon as you put carbohydrate in your mouth, it starts to be chemically digested. There's also a enzyme in saliva called lingual lipase. I don't know why it's called lingual. That usually is a reference term for tongue. Not made by a tongue, it's made by a salivary glands. It's a lipase. It breaks down lipids or fats, but not in your mouth, not until that fat reaches your stomach. Salivary amylase, because of pH optimal. Every one of your enzymes has a pH optimum, works best. Saliva has a pH of 6.8 to 7, and that's where salivary amylase works best. Lingual lipase works best at a very low pH and acidic pH, so it's going to be active in the stomach when the food hits the stomach. And the salivary amylase will actually be destroyed by the acid in the stomach. So it's only going to work in your mouth and down your esophagus. Mucus. There is mucus in saliva. Now, one of the purposes of saliva is to make things nice and soft and watery. So there's lots of water in saliva, and so it wouldn't. So we need to moisten our food and make it gooey and moist, and so it slides down the esophagus. Lysozyme, that is, I think we mentioned that in the immune system. It's a enzyme that breaks down bacteria. So it's antibacterial. So remember, everything, practically everything you eat has got some bacteria on it. You know, food isn't sterilized, particularly if it's not heated. So it helps, and it's apparently some immunoglobulins, antibodies in saliva as well. Lots of electrolytes in saliva. Remember, these are ions: sodium, potassium, calcium, and again, and hydrogen ion, of course, because it has a pH of 6.8 to 7, so it's either neutral or just slightly acidic. So salivation is the making of saliva. 1 to 1.5 liters per day. It's controlled by salivary nuclei in the medulla oblongata and pons, and can receive input from higher brain centers. So if your hunger center is in the hypothalamus, and when you get hungry, and particularly, like I said, if you start smelling food and get hungry, you're going to turn on the salivary center. You're going to be making more saliva. Turned on by the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, it's not turned off by the sympathetic. It's just reduced and made less watery with more mucus if the sympathetic nervous system is turned on. So that's why if you get frightened or agitated, your mouth tends to feel dry, like you've turned off saliva, but you really haven't turned off the saliva. You just made less watery saliva and with more mucus in it. So it feels like it's drier. But the sympathetic nervous system just changes the nature of saliva. It doesn't turn it off. Swallowing. $2 word for swallowing is deglutition. A center in medulla oblongata. There is a voluntary phase and some involuntary phases. The buccal phase is voluntary. So you push food back in your throat, and you initiate swallowing. Once you do that, then there's a pharyngeal esophageal phase, which is involuntary, which pushes the food into the esophagus, and then peristalsis takes over, which is the squeezing of food. It's called a bolus now, down the esophagus, and that's a short reflex. That's within the enteric nervous system. Then and of course, that esophagus is going to lead to the stomach and deposit the food that you ate into the stomach. And so we look at the gross anatomy of the stomach, also in the regions of the stomach, as soon as we look a little bit more on swallowing. And there's swallowing. Like I said, voluntary phase, bring it back, pushing food back with your tongue to the back of your throat, to your oral pharynx, and then that's going to take over with the pharyngeal phase, where the epiglottis comes over, closes off the glottis, the soft palate closes off the nasal passages, the food is pushed into the esophagus, and then the esophageal phase, also involuntary, where the food is now moving down the esophagus by peristalsis, by the contraction of the circular and longitudinal muscles. And gravity helps, of course, but it's not the major thing. You can, if you try it, you can hang upside down and still get food to your stomach. Peristalsis can work against gravity. Okay, and there's the stomach. Like I said, the most muscular organ. You can see that there are 3 layers of the muscularis: longitudinal layer, circular layer, and oblique layer. Now, the esophagus leads into the stomach, and there's an upper esophageal sphincter up there. As you can see by the slide, the esophagus is lined by stratified squamous epithelium. The stomach has a columnar epithelium and has gastric pits. In the different regions of the stomach, the most superior part is called the fundus. The middle part is just called the body. The lower part, inferior part, is called the pylorus. And the pylorus is another sphincter called the pyloric sphincter, which opens up into the small intestine. And you can see this so-called lesser curvature, and on the inside, greater curvature on the outside. As a matter of fact, the lesser omentum is attached to the lesser curvature. The greater omentum is attached to the greater curvature. What else? Oh, the area just where the esophagus enters the stomach is called the cardia, because it's really right here. It's right behind your heart. And that's why when we have acid reflux, that acid from the stomach splashes up above the upper esophageal sphincter, cause burning sensation, because we're going to see that the stomach is protected from its own acid. So the acid doesn't burn in the stomach, but the esophagus is not protected. The stomach has mucus to protect it. The esophagus does not. So when the acid splashes up, it causes pain. It's called heartburn because it feels like it's coming right from your heart, but it's actually coming from the cardia portion of you. Stomach, and in the esophagus. Okay. So, innervation and circulation. The stomach is innervated by both parasympathetic and sympathetic, and sympathetic is going to fire it up, and sympathetic is going to kind of shut it down. Blood from the stomach goes into the hepatic portal system. There's a little bit of absorption of nutrients in the stomach, not very much, but whatever is absorbed is sent into the hepatic portal system. There are gastric glands, and there are a lot of secretions in the stomach that we're going to have to know where they come from and what they do. Regenerative cells. These cells regenerate themselves all the time. In fact, the whole GI tract the epithelium of the whole GI tract sloughs off just like skin does, and it's regenerated, and you get I think it was something like every 5 months or something, you get a brand new lining of your GI tract, because they're very regenerative. Mucus cells, surface and neck cells, make mucus. It's a mucus membrane, mucus all the way along. Mucus is pretty important in the stomach to protect the stomach lining from the acid, the hydrochloric acid that's made by the stomach. And that's the next part. These parietal cells make hydrochloric acid. Why? We're going to see what the hydrochloric acid does. It also makes a protein called intrinsic factor, which later on will be bind to vitamin B12 and absorbed into your across your intestinal line. It's that you need intrinsic factor, otherwise you cannot absorb vitamin B12 without intrinsic factor. And then there's one that's not really mentioned that much by the book, called ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. It's going to make you hungry. And so this is an example of some hormones made in the GI tract that affect other organs. This one affects your brain, the hypothalamus. It gets to the hypothalamus and tells you you're hungry, eat something. The chief cells in these gastric glands make gastric lipase. So here's another lipase made by the stomach, and it makes something called pepsinogen, which is an inactive protease, that is an enzyme that breaks down protein. We're going to see that these are generally made in an inactive form. That's what the ogen means. And we're going to see that HCl actually breaks pepsinogen into pepsin, which is the active enzyme that's going to digest protein in your stomach. And then enteroendocrine cells are going to make a hormone called gastrin. And that's going to feed back upon the stomach and really turn on the secretion and turn on the motility of the stomach. So it's secreted by the stomach and it affects the stomach. It also has an effect later on down the GI tract in your intestine. We'll talk about that one later on. So there are secretions, hydrochloric acid, and its mechanism is the ubiquitous equation. Makes the hydrogen ion that mixes with the chloride that makes hydrochloric acid. Pepsin, and that, like I said, the hydrochloric acid has a couple of roles. One is to turn pepsinogen into pepsin. It's also a protective role. You can think of it as part of the immune system. It's going to kill any bacteria that you eat, are mostly going to get killed by the hydrochloric acid in your stomach because it's down to a pH of like 1.5 or 2. It's lethal for most bacteria. All right. As you mentioned, gastric lipase, intrinsic factor, gut-brain peptides. This is one of the things that where ghrelin fits. It's called gut-brain because they're made in the gut and they affect the brain. It's going to be, like I said, ghrelin is the hunger hormone. There's going to be other hormones made in the secreted by the intestine that are actually going to be what we call satiety factors. They're going to tell your hypothalamus, stop eating, you're full. Right? In motility, mixing and emptying. So once this bolus of food gets to the stomach, it's called chyme. And the stomach really mixes it up and pushes it around and mixes it up. And when that chyme gets pushed down to the pyloric region, this pyloric pressure, that stretching of the pyloric region will open the pyloric sphincter and allow some of the chyme to enter the small intestine, and the rest is pushed back by retropulsion. So this is going to be, and we're going to get to the regulation of gastric emptying. And there are 3 phases, and it's important to empty the stomach, like I said, at the right rate, not too fast, not too slow. And we'll see how that's regulated later on. So there is the picture of a gastric pit and all of the different cells that line it, and most of their secretions, mucus by the mucus cells and mucus net cells, intrinsic factor, hydrochloric acid, and ghrelin. See, ghrelin is not on this figure, but it should be, by the parietal cells, chief cells making pepsinogen, which is inactive, and then the G cells are the ones at the base of the pit that are making gastrin and putting gastrin into the blood system. The ghrelin made by the parietal cells is also put into the blood supply, and they become systemic hormones. These are systemic hormones. Okay, so I'm going to cut it off right here. So this is the digestion-1, and we'll pick it up on the regulation of gastric motility, those 3 phases I mentioned in the next video. Okay, so I'll see you later. Catch you in the next video.